Go ahead and, okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. And I think that it's important before we have an actual Torah lesson that I tell you something about my story and my work in like globally. Okay. So I made Aliyah in 2010. As I am a BT, I was born Jewish. I became religious in my 20s, which now was a very long time ago, but I grew up with, I knew that I was Jewish, but I knew nothing about what that meant. And I only became interested when I was in my 20s. I am now married to a rabbi and have been for a couple of decades now, almost 3 decades. And we live in Efrat. Okay. So I made my living in America. I was an administrator in colleges and universities. I have a PhD in adult education. And that was my world for a very long time. When we made Aliyah, I wasn't able to do that. And so I thought, well, what other skills do I have? And I eventually started doing some social media work and I started writing. And I have also in my Jewish journey have had three very strong passions. One was when I first became religious, I was obsessed with everything that had to do with the intersection between women and Torah. Not always for a good reason, because it was a very painful time for me trying to integrate my sense of my, okay, trying to, only one of us can talk at a time. Trying to integrate my sense of myself as a woman in Judaism, coming from a background where there was different values and so forth. That took a long time. After I sort of got some resolution to that, then I started to get very, very excited about Israel. We were living in America in Baltimore. And after on September 11, 2001, in a way that I had very rarely experienced, Hashem sent me a message that made it clear to me that Baltimore was not our final destination. And that thought had never occurred to me. I did not grow up in a like a rah-rah Israel kind of home. I didn't come to Israel for the first time until 1996. And my children are fourth generation American. I never thought of Israel as my future, and yet the thought would not leave me. And so for like 9 years, I basically nagged my husband, who ironically was born here. His parents were Holocaust survivors and they came here right after the war. And he was born here, but he left when he was very young. So for him, it was like coming back. We did eventually come back in 2010. And at the tail end of that, I started to become very interested in Geula, in everything that had to do with where are we in Jewish history? Because what I saw was that America was really just the last stop in, for my family, the last stop in the diaspora Jewish experience, and it was time to come home. So, so it all comes together. So I come to Israel, I go to Ulpan, like every good Ola, and it takes me a while to find my footing here, but I do eventually start writing, and I start writing about Geula topics. And I get invited to write for an organization which is called Israel 365. Israel 365 is based in Beit Shemesh, and they have a particular outreach to Christian Zionists. So the entire staff, with the exception of one person who's like the Christian consultant, the entire staff is Orthodox Jews. And everything that they do, whether it's raising money, educating, having a news service, whatever they do is with an eye toward building bridges towards Christians who love the land of Israel. So my assignment was to write about what is going on in Israel that seems to have some connection to Geula, some fulfillment of biblical prophecy. And so I didn't know very much about Christianity at that point, but whatever, I took the job. And after a while, the Christians who were reading what I wrote would contact me offline and they would say, we're coming to Israel. We read your articles. We would like to meet you. And so they would come to Israel and we would usually, either they would come to our home for a meal for Shabbat, or we would meet them at a restaurant in Jerusalem. And I would say, okay, what's your story? And they would tell me that they have Shabbat in their house, or they eat biblically clean, or they know what the Parsha is, and other things that up until that point I always understood as Jewish things. Like, what in the world are these Christians primarily from the US, but not only, doing, dabbling in Jewish stuff? So I thought, well, let me write an article about this phenomenon that was just learning about. This is like already more than 10 years ago. And I posted something, as I often do when I'm writing, on Facebook to see if anybody I knew somebody like this who had some kind of Jewish practice woven into their non-Jewish life. And one of my colleagues said, this is much bigger than an article. There's a book in here. And so as I was discovering more about these people, I discovered that they fall originally, I thought they fell into sort of four categories. They might be Christian Zionists. That means they go to Sunday church and they are very, very connected um, to the God of Christianity. I don't want to offend anybody. I tend to be very open and just use the word Jesus. Is that okay if I do that here? Because I don't want to upset anybody. You'd rather I don't. So one of
Yes, yeah.
so I'm not a fan of that, but I will.
You said it was great.
Huh?
You said it was great. Christian. I think you said the God of Christianity.
Okay, fine. So one of my colleagues in Efrat calls him Cousin Jay. But
I said Jason.
anyway, so
The J-man.
the J-man, that I use that too. Anyway, so the some of them are like that. Some of them believe about themselves, as they have explained to me, that their connection, they feel a very deep connection to Israel, to the God of Israel, to the Torah, to the Jewish people, but they don't think that they are Jews. They believe that they are descended from the 10 lost tribes. And that is why they have this deep, deep connection. And they reminded me very often, because Jews are often very sloppy about the way we refer to the Am Yisrael before the or before the time that it was divided into the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Okay, then there were B'nai Noach, people who identify as B'nai Noach. There were people who identify as Ger Toshav, which is a halachic status that actually doesn't exactly exist right now, because in order to be recognized as a Ger Toshav, you need a Sanhedrin. We don't have a Sanhedrin. And so, but these are people who live a very Torah-based lifestyle that have renounced all association with any other faith system. And in the days before the beginning of Christianity, were actually eligible halachically to live in the land of Israel alongside the Jews. The same calendar, the same lifestyle, and so forth, but not with the yoke of Torah. Okay, so I published this book, and one day there was a group that came from some place in America. They invited me to speak on their tour. And I said, I had this idea of doing a Shabbaton where we would have Jewish teachers, and all of the students would be from the nations who were interested in learning Torah from Jewish teachers. And it would be a whole Shabbaton experience. So it would model a Shabbat going through, but it would be led by Jews. What do you think of that? I throw out to the group. So a woman in the back, she raises her hand and she says to me, well, I think that'll be really good as long as you don't teach any Talmud. So I almost fell off my chair, because I don't know, I don't even understand where she's coming from. So I say to her, well, what do you mean by that? And she says, well, the Talmud, it's full of witchcraft and debauchery and demons and all this stuff. So that was my first introduction to the idea that there's some learning that these folks need to do. And I understood that, I came to understand gradually that the Jewish people of today, the process mirrors my own process. When I first started learning about these people, I felt very possessive, to be honest. Like, this Torah belongs to us. What in the world are you doing messing with our stuff? You have your own holy books, your own holidays, your own traditions. We do not We're not proselytizing. We're not inviting you in. You go do your thing and leave us and do ours. And I was talking to a mentor of mine in this field, and he said, oh, yeah, everybody feels that way in the beginning because as growing up Jewish, we are very much taught like to keep your boundaries firm because it is neither safe nor smart to interact with anybody who's not Jewish. I'm not talking about like small things, but I'm saying about spiritual things, about um, having interfaith dialogue, or like that's all dangerous territory. Don't go there. Okay. But the second book, which I know some of you have seen, is called Lighting Up the Nations. And it's really something that I came to understand, which is that what I used to think Or LaGoyim meant was the Jews would come back to the land of Israel. We would create a perfect, ideal society here, and the rest of the world would look upon us with great admiration and say, we want to be like that. And so we would be radiating light into the world. That's what I really thought it meant. Okay, what I believe it means now is that the Torah was given, it is true, the Torah is given to the Israelites, to the nation of Israel. And for historical reasons, I don't need to go into, for 2,000 years, what we did was preserve it and protect it. But we are now living in a time as we get closer to Geula that there are souls from all over the world who are drawn to the wisdom of the Torah. Some of them want to join us and actually do a full conversion, and some of them just want to walk beside us along with their correct understanding of what I call the universal wisdom of Torah. What are the Torah's messages for the rest of the world? Okay, because they are all over. Not everything in Torah relates to people who are not going to join our nation.
And Jewish teaching.
Right.
Teaching coming from the Jews.
Correct. It has to be the Jews who are knowledgeable about Torah leading this. And what I found is and I know that I do not know all of them, but every person in this, with this mindset that I meet is like desperately hungry and thirsty for authenticity. And they want to learn Torah from somebody who isn't going to mix it all up with other stuff. Okay. So that's the first two books. The book I am going to, God willing, release in the next 8 weeks or so is a collection of stories of people who grew up Christian. They are not Jews. It's not a book about conversion. It's a book about the challenges that they faced separating from the church and the God of Christianity and trying to figure out who the heck are they now? If they are not Christians anymore and they're not on a path to conversion, they are bereft of a spiritual identity. And so that book is almost finished. And then what I came to share with you today is the fourth book in this series, which is, so I realized that a lot of people who grew up with a Christian background, they know what we Jews call pshat. They know the simple meaning of the text. They know the basic Bible story. What they lack and what the knowledgeable Jews can offer them is insight into the rest of the story. Okay, with what's embedded in the Hebrew, what's embedded in Chazal, in what the sages have to share. And I wanted to illustrate that. So my own students, so I teach a group of women from all over the world every Tuesday on Zoom, but that's only like a small group of people that I can reach. But there are people who need to hear this message who are not going to come onto my Zoom class. And so I thought, oh, what mechanism can I use to show them there is so much more to the Bible, to Hebrew scripture than you know. Okay. And I decided to pick 10 women from that whose stories are told in Tanakh, but who were not born into the Israelite nation. So there's two reasons for that. One is because I don't think we don't have enough emphasis. I know that Rebbe Simcha Bracha wrote, what's the name of her book? It's about women in the crossroads, right? And there are a few books like that. They do tend to focus on the same women over and over again. I don't know if you've noticed that. So some of these women are, their stories are just generally not told. And also, I wanted to use that really, it's sort of a device, it's a mechanism to teach deeper insights. Okay. So um, that's sort of the background. And I'll tell you, on some level, I don't even understand how I got here. Like, nobody grows up thinking, I want to teach Torah to the nations. That's my life goal. That never occurred to me. But I did see that over time, Hashem was leading me in this path very gently. And I'm going to tell you what one of the first indicators was. So I happen to be excessively so, very active on Facebook. Okay. And I used to get messages, I'm talking years ago, 15 years ago, from random non-Jews who would ask me a question. Like this one guy says he lives like in Louisiana, which if you don't know the US, it's like nowheresville. Okay. And he's walking on some path behind his home and he finds something on the floor and he thinks it's an artifact from the Holy Temple and he wants to restore it. He wants me to help him restore it to Israel. Okay. So, all right. So maybe there's some like mental illness going on, I don't know. But the fact is that I kept getting people like this. And I would always say, like, I am not the only Jew on Facebook. Where in the world do you come to me to ask me like such a question? And it became clear later on that Hashem was like warming me up, you know?
It's the Orla Goyim.
Right. Right, but I didn't even know it at the time. I didn't know that that's what Hashem was preparing me for. But as things unfolded, it became so clear to me that he picked me. And I think that I actually, I can name a couple of reasons why. Number one, I'm a mother tongue English speaker. If I only spoke Hebrew, I might know more Torah than I know, but I wouldn't be able to reach people who are English speakers, which is a dominant language. It's not the only language, but there's plenty of English speakers who need Torah. That's number one. Number two, Hashem sent me a rabbi for a husband, which does not automatically, it does not automatically devolve any great knowledge on my head, but I see that it opens certain doors. It's a very weird thing. Like it gives me a certain amount of credibility, which is it's fake because it's not based on anything except that I happen to marry a rabbi. But I'm telling you, it is a factor. It does work. It is. It's was that? Well, okay, but what I'm saying is I wasn't any different in terms of what I knew the day before we got married versus the day after. But
20 years after, you probably know
say again.
that. After, in time.
Yeah, in time I learned a lot more. But so that was another thing. Another thing is that I actually happen to have a background in adult education. So I am very comfortable speaking and teaching. And I think the fourth thing is my own journey, which is that I grew up knowing zippity doo dah about Jew. Like I knew I was a Jew, but I did not understand what that meant. I didn't, we had like I have a younger brother who's 4.5 years younger than me. And when he became whatever age it is, my family joined a congregation, a liberal American Jewish congregation, in order that he could have a bar mitzvah because they were of that mindset. You don't need to educate girls, but boys need to have a bar mitzvah. Okay. So that just I have like such vague Jewish memories as a child that it wasn't until I became an adult and started learning for myself that I understood what they were about. I'm going to give you just one example. I had my paternal grandmother, Alea Shalom, was she was somebody that the family, this is what the family would say about her. She never ate at McDonald's. Now, if you grew up in America or whatever, like that was like, why would she eat at McDonald's? I didn't understand. I just knew this is what we said about her. Like it was this big thing. Come to find out that until she left New York and moved to Florida, she had a kosher home. But nobody told me that as a kid. I had no idea. I didn't know what that meant. It was only later that I understood what all the hubbub was, and my grandmother had never eaten at McDonald's. That was very weird to me. So like I got bits and pieces of it. So the fourth thing is really because I grew up not knowing anything and had to learn everything as an adult, I have like a much deeper connection with adult beginners. And so I can take a concept and like super simplify it.
Wants to see the end this year. She wants to learn and see the end this year.
Okay, so I thought, so in this book, Women from the Nations in the Hebrew Bible, I picked these 10 women and I have done 4 of them. And I was thinking, okay, which of the 4 they are not all, by the way, lovely, heartwarming stories. Some of these women are not like such good characters, but I picked somebody who is today because of, I wanted to start out nice and not, when we know each other a little better, I might share some of the more, the other stuff. But I want to talk about Rachav, okay? Rachav, who the title of her chapter is Rachav from Harlot to Holy Woman, okay?
Rachav from?
Rachav,
From what?
Sefer Yehoshua.
Harlot.
Oh, from harlot to holy woman,
What's harlot?
a prostitute. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about the backstory, which I don't know how much anybody knows. Some of you may know more, some of you may know less. I just want to put us all on the same foundation, okay? So we're at the point of the story, and this story comes in the very beginning, the story of Rachav, the very beginning of the book of Yoshua, the book of Joshua, okay? So Moshe is dead, okay? And the Israelites are now led by Joshua, led by Yehoshua. And as they are about to enter the land, Yehoshua needs some military information, and so he sends 2 spies. This should sound familiar to you. Okay, not 12, but 2. And he sends them directly to the home of Rachav. And what they are there to do is to investigate how much power do the native Canaanim, the Canaanites' military resistance, how strong are they, so we figure out like what our military approach has to be, okay? And just to, this comes from Yehoshua chapter 2, verse 1. I'm just going to read you this verse in English. And Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men out of Shittim to spy secretly, saying, go see the land and Jericho. Jericho, Jericho, is the city where Rachav lived. It was a border city. Okay, so it was one of the first fortresses that they were going to come upon when entering the land. They went and they came to the house of an innkeeper named Rachav, and they lay there, meaning they slept there overnight. Okay, so Jewish tradition identifies these 2 spies. You know, anybody know who they are? Pinchas and Kalev, right? Okay, okay. You can't answer any more questions. Okay. Okay. So who are they? Kalev is one of the original 12 spies. Okay, he's the only one, along with Yehoshua, who comes back with a positive report about what they saw. The other 10 were, do you want to just uncover the food? Do people are like sneaking food from under the napkins? And I feel like,
Yeah, okay. I don't know how to do this because really it's a Sudan meaning. So like we're supposed to have like we're supposed to make a bracha on each thing and a kavanah, but like I guess people can like pick a little, but like we need to like be able to say the bracha.
all right, make sure there's something left over after. Okay. Anyway, so these two come back with an encouraging report, a faithful report. And so Yoshua knows he can trust Kalev. The other one is Pinchas, who was chosen because he was zealous for God. Okay, and we hear his story in the book of Bamidbar, in the book of Numbers, where he defends God when he publicly slays Zimri, who is a important person among the Israelites, and Cosby, and they are doing things they ought not be doing. Okay, and so we read about that in the book of Bamidbar, chapter 25. So now he's selected these spies that he knows that he can rely on, and he reasons that Jericho is a city, a heavily fortified city, just as you come into the land. So it feels like if they're going to be able to conquer Jericho, the conquest of the rest of the land will be that much easier. Now, the story of Rachav and the spies it happens to be the Haftarah for the portion of Shalach, which is the spy story. Okay, so when we read the spy story from Bamidbar, the Haftarah, which has an echo of that, is the story of Rachav and the spies. Rabbi Nir Manusi, who teaches, he's a contemporary rabbi who's teaching now, he points out an interesting contrast between these two stories. When the spies come, there are 12 of them, and they go all over the place. They go here, they go there, they talk to this one, they talk to that one, and so forth. When the spies in the time of Rachav come, first of all, there's only 2 of them. They have one conversation with one person in one city in one day. And the point he's making is that this is a foreshadowing of the spiritual power of Rachav. Okay, that she was in a precarious position socially for a number of reasons, which we will talk about, because she is a triply marginalized character, which we will talk about. But she has loyalty to Yehoshua, to Joshua, and to the Israelite nation, even though she is a part of an enemy nation. And they could easily punish her as a traitor for what she's done. Nevertheless, she warmly welcomes the spies and she hides them from, should we pause? She hides them when the Canaanite king sends his army people to come and look for the spies. Now, Rachav seems to have known that the Israelites are going to take over this land. And she waited actually patiently for them her whole life, which up until this point is 40 years. She's 40 years old. She has some Ruach HaKodesh. She knows something. She knows who the good guys are. She knows who the bad, even though she's part of the enemy nation, she knows, and she's patiently waiting for them. And so when the 2 spies appear at her home, she is not shocked. Okay. She knows who they are. She knows what they're there for. And she takes upon herself the obligation to be of help to them. And she's able to do that, even at the risk of her own life, because of her lifestyle. Okay, so God recognizes her faithfulness and her desire to join the Israelite nation, and so he leads the spies to her. Okay, there's some chess thing going on here that God is running the show. Once the soldiers leave and she has hidden the spies, she tells them that the leaders of the Canaanite nation are actually afraid of the Israelites, which is like a military secret, right? And that because she and everybody in Canaan had heard about all the miracles that God did for this nation. And she herself understood that the land is destined to be given over to the Israelites. And so as a result of passing on this military intelligence, she and her family are spared. Okay. But who is Rachav really? Who is she? So her true identity is actually hidden in Hebrew, the first time that she's mentioned in Tanakh, which is at the very beginning of the 2nd chapter of Yehoshua. Because in Hebrew, we read that the 2 spies are sent to a Beit Isha Zonah. Okay. Some translate that as the house of an innkeeper, and some translate it, a female innkeeper, as the house of a prostitute. So which is it? Okay. So we see in the text that Rachav lives in Yericho, and in Jewish sources, she is often called Rachav HaZonah, which indicates that either she was a prostitute or she was an innkeeper, okay, because this double meaning comes from the Hebrew. Zonah, which literally means a harlot, comes from litzuna, which means to prostitute, okay? Prostitution is znut. And lazun, you hear the similarity of all these words, it means to feed, okay? There's, and from the verb lazun, we get mazon, which is food, which sounds a lot like zonah. So all of these words, like both meanings are embedded in Rachav HaZonah. Also, so the name Rachav Hazonah may come from both. Traditional Jewish sources agree that she was a prostitute of the highest caliber, and that she was 10 years old when the Israelites left Egypt, right? And the entire 40 years that they have been wandering in the desert, she has been doing her profession. But she might have also been an innkeeper, and maybe she served meals to her clients. Okay, that's a possibility. The Talmud teaches that there were 4 women of such extraordinary beauty in Jewish history: Sarah, Abigail, who was one of the wives of King David, Rachav, and Esther, as in Queen Esther, as in Form Story. Okay, as a matter of fact, the Talmud teaches that any man who had ever met her, if he would, this is a little, it's a little spicy. Any man who had ever met her, who would say her name twice, like Rachav, Rachav, would experience a seminal emission just by remembering how beautiful that she was. Okay, what is her connection to the land of Israel? She lives in the land of Israel, but what is her connection? Rachav, so we talked about the Hazonah part. Rachav, her first name, or her proper name, symbolizes the land of Israel because Rachav in Hebrew means wide open. So when it's used as an adjective referring to the land of Israel, Rachava means it contains wide open spaces. So when we say Birkat Hamazon, when we say grace after meals, we refer to the land as Eretz Chemda Tova or Rachava. Okay, meaning the land of Israel is a pleasant land that is good and wide open. When God speaks to Moshe at the burning bush, he refers to Israel very similarly, Eretz Tova or Rachava, a good and spacious land, when he's telling him, you got to go there, okay? So Rachav's name also symbolizes the goodness of the land, the openness of the land. And the other part of her name we spoke about a little bit, but it also represents the challenges of the land, because God is constantly warning the Israelites, when you come to the land, don't get tripped up in Avodah Zarah, in the idolatry. Don't follow the practices of the Canaanite inhabitants of the land where I am sending you, okay? So Rachav Hazonah symbolizes both the good in the land and its openness and spaciousness and so forth, and also the spiritual challenges that the Israelites are going to face when they get there, not to be tempted by the Canaanite lifestyle, okay? So Rachav tells the spies what she knows because she loves the land, and she knows that the Israelites are its rightful inhabitants. And as I said, she, in exchange for sharing this information, she asks for protection for herself and her family when the Israelites are going to come and do battle with her people. So this part of the story is probably the most famous part of the story, that Kalev and Pinchas say to her, okay, take a scarlet rope, a red ribbon, whatever it is, and tie it to the window. And then and anybody you put inside your house, they will be safe. We won't attack. And what does that remind you of? Something very recent. Yeah. Okay. So Pesach, the blood on the doorpost was also a protection, also red, interestingly enough. It was a door, not a window, but you see that there's some parallel here. Okay. Now, Rachav made her living, and it appears that she did not have a family. She had brothers and sisters, and so she had no husband and children of her own. That she lived to serve others in this way, but she was not a pushover. Okay, so she had agency, what we would call today agency. So by hiding the spy, she is openly defying the leadership of her own people, who are the authority figures in her world. She's also acting as the family matriarch, because she's going to take her family members and say, you come and stay in my house and you'll be protected from the destruction that is about to commence. Okay, there's 3 other stories of women in Tanakh that involve windows. And they are David HaMelech's first wife, Michal, the mother of Sisera, and Jezebel. They are all pictured passively looking through windows. Now, I have the verses here, but just trust me on this. If you want to know the verses, I'm happy to share them with you. But I want to just get back to Rachav because what's that? Achav's wife.
You asked who the three were, right?
Michal.
Oh, Michal.
Michal, the mother of Sisera, who sits and waits for her son to get. I don't know how much everybody know. I don't want to make any assumptions, but when you read the book, the chapter and verse, it's all there. You can just look it up and it's enough. Okay. So the degree to which these three women are able to influence their own circumstances is very limited. And there's an idea that Rachav also got something going on with a window, but she has agency. Okay. In Rachav's case, her window is a tool of tshuva. Because the window that she's going to tie this red string to, this scarlet rope, whatever, is number one, the window that she sends the spies out of. It is also the window that her nocturnal visitors, if you're following my drift, would come and visit her. Okay. So that becomes the exact mechanism by which she is able to save her extended family. How does she become aware of God's intention to allow the Israelites to succeed in taking over Canaan? So we talked about the possibility she has the Ruach HaKodesh, but there's a much more practical response that we find in the Talmud, and that is she was, I told you, a prostitute with high-level clients who knew military stuff and who in intimate moments, in times when their guard was down, she was able to gather certain information from them that she later passed on to the spies. Okay, so there's that. There's did she have some prophecy? In any case, she did not. What I really want to make clear is that she was in great jeopardy. She put her life on the line for doing what was right. She was aligned with the Israelite nation against her own people, and she used whatever tools she had in order to do that. So interestingly enough, it is this exact dynamic, I think, that I see of people from the nations who want to align with God and his people. Okay, often against the interests of their own communities, often against great social pressure, often there are consequences for doing that. If you're born Jewish and you love Israel, that's very interesting, but nobody's gonna persecute you for that. But if you are from outside of Am Yisrael and you have this calling and you have this relationship, it can often be very painful because people in your life don't necessarily understand that. Okay, so after this crucial conversation, and she helps Caleb and Pinchas escape safely from her house and from Yericho by exiting through this window on this rope. It is understood that this act is an act of tshuva, and there's actually recorded a prayer that she says. According to our rabbis, at that moment, Rachav prays, and she says to God, Master of the universe, with three things I have sinned: with this rope, with this window, and with this wall, the one that right? She says, how many times have I used them to let men in and out to sleep with me? How many times have I used them for evil? But now I'm using them for good. I'm using them to help these righteous men escape. May this good deed be an atonement for all the sins that I did with them. Oh, merciful one, please accept my repentance and my prayer. Okay, so, okay. So she sends the spies away and she instructs them to go into hiding for 3 days. Why? Because according to Jewish tradition, she got some nevuah, she got a prophecy that God revealed to her that in the merit of the 3 days that the Israelites waited at the foot of Mount Sinai before Matan Torah, before the giving of the Torah, that he would never allow righteous people to be endangered for more than 3 days. And so so according to this opinion, God tells her, tell them that. Tell them for 3 days, keep yourself undercover, and then you're free to go. Okay. So I mentioned to you before that Rachav's personality or her station in life could be understood to be triply marginalized. That's contemporary language. Obviously, they didn't talk about that before. She was a Kanani. Okay. She was a member of the enemy nation. She was a woman and she was a prostitute. Okay. So she was kind of low on the totem pole as compared to, let's say, Yoshua, who is the leader of the Israelites. Okay. But by doing what she did, and through her personal spiritual growth and through her own tshuva process, she actually shot right up to the top of Israelite society. If you do not know this, she ended up married to Yehoshua, which gives me chills. Okay. Okay. So she's one of the God-fearing women that joins the Israelite nation. There's others. There's Hagar, who is later in her life called Keturah, after the death of Sarah. When she marries Abraham, there's Tzipporah, the wife of Moshe. There is the daughter of Paro, Batya. The very famous one is, of course, Ruth and Yael. And it is said that she is rewarded with an elevated place in the world to come. And this helps to illustrate the power of tshuva. She starts out in life at a low, low place, and she ascends to like the top of the heap. Okay. Now, I have a few more things to say. There's an allusion to Rachav in the book of Proverbs, in the book of Mishlei. In chapter 31, where we find the words for Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor, what we sing on Friday night, there is a tradition that every verse is at play on multiple levels. Now, this is true for all of Tanakh, but it's so clear with Eshet Chayil. So on the first level this is some description of the ideal woman and all the things that she does. It can be understood in that way. A little bit deeper there's a midrash that connects each verse to a different woman in Tanakh. Okay, and then on a deeper level, there's an opinion that Eshet Chayil isn't actually about women like us at all. It's about concepts in Torah that are feminine, like Torah, like Shabbat, like Neshama. Okay, but for now, let's just go to the second level. That the verse that's an allusion to Rachav is the one that says, "She fears not snow for her household, for her entire household is clothed with scarlet wool." Okay, so Rachav doesn't fear the Israelites because when they come to destroy the city of Yericho, scarlet wool is going to protect her family. Okay, so in addition, the connection between Rachav and Scarlet is that I'll talk about this in a minute, but through her are descended Kohanim, priests. And as leaders in Israel, they dressed in shades of scarlet, which is a royal color, right? Scarlet is considered a royal color. All right. So Rachav, the Israelites return and they conquer the land. Rachav develops she has a very good foundation, but now she is very deeply, strongly attached to God. And she marries Yehoshua, who's the leader of the people. And she who was once the most immoral of an immoral nation becomes the wife of the leader of the holiest nation at that time. Interestingly enough, I was mentioning there's a Christian teaching that Rachav married someone named Salmon, and they have a son named Boaz. Maybe you know where this is going, who was the great grandfather of King David. This Boaz, who has Oved, who has Yishai, who has David. There is no Jewish source for this. I believe it is a Christian distortion in order to connect Rachav to Mashiach. Okay. There's another teaching about Rachav that has to do with Gilgulim, has to do with reincarnation. It says that, according to the Chidah, that Rachav is a reincarnation of the wife of Potiphar. So we're going all the way back to the beginning of the Egyptian story. Eshet Potiphar, Potiphar's wife, is an Egyptian woman. She's mentioned in the story of Yosef, and she's married to Potiphar, who's like an important guy in Egypt during the time of Yaakov and the 12 tribes. And you know this part of the story, she falsely accuses Yosef, who is a slave in her household, of attempting to have his way with her. And this accusation leads to Yosef's imprisonment. But there's much more to the story, because her attraction to Yosef was not just based on the fact that he was a good-looking guy, which apparently, according to Torah, very simply, he was. But Eshet Potiphar, on some level, she probably didn't understand, wanted to join her soul to the soul of Yosef. And that did not happen in her lifetime. Although her adopted daughter does end up married to Yosef, but she herself, her neshama, does not directly connect with the line of Yosef. Okay. But when Rachav marries Yehoshua, that is the closing of the circle, because Rachav is a Gilgul of Eshet Potiphar, and Yehoshua is connected to Yosef. So Yoshua is both a physical, Yoshua comes from the tribe of Ephraim, who is one of the sons of Yosef, but he also contains some of the spiritual qualities of Yosef. Okay, and I'm just going to conclude with this. Rachav and Yehoshua have children. They have only daughters. But from these daughters come a whole group of prophets and one prophetess. The most well-known of her descendants were the prophets Yirmiyahu and the prophetess Huldah, who is one of the 7 women in Tanakh who are recorded as having had prophecy. So in total, there were 8 prophets who were also Kohanim, who were descended from Rachav and Yehoshua. Okay, and there's also a connection with Rachav to Chizkiyahu, to Hezekiah. I'm sorry, to Yirmiyahu. Who is one of her descendants. So our rabbis teach that her descendant was once saved in his time. Yirmiyahu was saved by the merit of her act. Okay. And so here's how it goes. He is thrown into a pit. Yeah. Right. By Ebed Melech, which it literally means a servant of the king, was sent to bring him up out of the depth. And Jewish tradition says that Yirmiyahu says to him, if only I had a ladder. And God responds to Yirmiyahu saying, you want a ladder? Your grandmother used a rope, and, kind of retold that story. And there's also a tradition that Chizkiyahu referred to the merit of Rachav in his prayer when do you know this part of the story where he turns and faces the wall? That I always understood that as the wall in his room, like he's laying in bed and he turns and faces the wall. But there is an opinion that this wall is not the physical description of the room he was in, but it's a reference to the city wall from which Rachav saved Kalev and Pinchas and all the souls that were descended from her extended family who all joined the Israelite nation. And referencing the many converts that resulted from Rachav's act, Hezekiah prayed, will you not save me, whose forefathers brought many converts to you? This is a reference to Rachav. And God accepts Hezekiah's prayer, and he lives for another 15 years. Okay, that is a little bit of the deeper story of Rachav. And